and welcome to a special edition of Liberty Nation Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Ellen's economics correspondent. This week, is the US in a recession? The second quarter gross domestic product contracted 0.9% following a 1.6% drop in the first quarter. This means the United States economy has met the technical definition of a recession. This has the White House and its allies in the press trying to downplay recession talk, attempting to redefine the economics term. Of course, these are the same people who said for a year that inflation was transitory. So, what is the truth, and what is poppycock in this environment of mixed messaging, a chaotic economy, and ineptitude from the administration and the Federal Reserve? To help us find a needle of truth in a haystack of establishment speak, please welcome special guest, legendary investor and author Jim Rogers, who has also collected more air miles than anyone on the planet with his adventures across the globe. Welcome to the program, sir.
I am delighted to be here, Andrew. Thank you.
So right off the bat, before we spoke, US GDP contracted for the second straight quarter. CNBC and the White House are afraid to say the R word, but is the US in a recession?
Well, I don't know if we're in a recession or not. We will know later because the government certainly doesn't know. They're always the last to know. In the last recession, we were in a recession and the government adamantly insisted we were not. They didn't know what was going on. They rarely do. We probably are in a recession, but the worst is not over. We have worse to come before this is over.
Actually, that leads me to the next question. It reminds me around 2007, you would appear on CNBC or Bloomberg and you would warn about a financial crisis, and the host would become so defensive and saying, how could you say that? Mm-hmm. And you called it then. So gazing into your reliable economic prognostication skills, is the economy going to experience the same type of downturn as 2000 and 2009 or worse?
No, it's going to be much worse. 2008, we had a big problem because of too much debt. Andrew, since then, the debt look out the window, the debt has skyrocketed all over the world. The United States alone has gone up by billions, trillions of dollars. Japan's more debt every day. I mean, it's amazing how much debt has been piled up. So the next recession has to be the worst in my lifetime. I'm not trying to scare us. I'm just stating a few facts.
So you're saying we need to buy some razor blades and drink Pepto-Bismol, is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't go quite that far, but I would be knowledgeable. I would watch Swamponomics if I were people, get informed, because if you become knowledgeable, then you'll get worried, and then you might do something and you might be prepared.
So turning to the Federal Reserve, during the July FOMC meeting, the central bank raised interest rates by 75 basis points. Powell says the U.S. isn't in a recession. He also said that inflation was transitory, but he also noted that path to a soft landing has narrowed. How do you think the Federal Reserve has performed in this environment since the start of the pandemic?
Andrew, the central banks around the world rarely know what's going on. There have been a few good central bankers in the past. We've had a couple in the U.S. in the last 100-odd years. There was a very good one in India a few years ago, but most of these guys don't have a clue. They're bureaucrats and academics, and they're trying to save their jobs. They don't care about you and me. They care about saving their jobs.
When you look at the global economy, then it seems like all the major economies are just dropping the ball in this type of situation. Do you see, with your experience traveling all over the world and studying the markets, do you see anyone handling the situation well?
Oh, it's a good question, extremely good question. I haven't thought about it. No, I don't know of anybody who is doing. I mean, China is doing a less bad job, because they didn't print nearly as much money as others. They didn't borrow nearly as they did. I mean, they spent and they printed, but nothing like Japan or the U.S. or, for instance. I cannot think of anybody. I mean, Uzbekistan is probably not doing a bad job. I started investing there not long ago. Most major countries are not doing a very good job at all.
So actually, you mentioned about China. One thing I'm curious about, one quote of yours has always stood on my mind. You said that a few years ago. You said that the 19th century belonged to Great Britain, the 20th century belonged to the United States, and now the 21st century will belong to China. Considering everything that's been going on in China, whether it's Evergrande or now the situation or the banks or all this billions of dollars of stimulus, do you still hold that true? Do you still think that China is going to be the major economic powerhouse this century?
Well, look out the window, Andrew. You see what's happened in this century with China. I mean, has it gone from nothing to the second largest or maybe the largest economy in the world? Andrew, they're certainly going to have lots of problems. The U.S. became the most successful country in the 20th century. Along the way, we had a gigantic civil war. We had many depressions. We had riots in the street, massacres in the streets. You could buy and sell congressmen. You can still buy and sell congressmen, but in those days they were cheap. You could buy 4 or 5 for the price of one today. We had gigantic problems. Most Europeans said, who would ever invest in that country? That's not even the Wild West. That's just wild. But you know the rest of the story. We became the most successful country in the 20th century. So of course China is going to have problems. But when you see problems in China, you should probably start thinking about investing.
And then finally, before I let you go, what do you think about the job President Joe Biden has done? I mean, it seems like he's presiding over a crisis every single front of the economy and the geopolitical front. What do you think because you're in Singapore right now and you're watching from an outlook perspective, how do you think the United States is performing under a Biden administration?
Well, I haven't seen that he's done very much at all. That may be good because most of the things he's done in the past have been wrong, have been bad. He got us into this, he and his cabinet, or he and his people, bureaucrats, inflamed Ukraine. They had the coup back in 2014. They instigated a coup, and then they kept insisting that Ukraine would be part of NATO. Now, listen, I'm not trying to defend Mr. Putin at all, because what he's done is absurd. But, we certainly are not blameless in what's been going on. The U.S. State Department and Biden have been part of the reason that this is happening. Again, I'm not defending Mr. Putin. Don't misunderstand. I don't see anything that he's done right. I certainly don't see anything that he's done. He said there was no recession, no inflation, don't worry. He kept telling us that. I mean, if you can tell me something that he has done right and it is good for the world, I will consider it and maybe even retract.
So I guess that would be an episode of just silence then. It's hard to think of anything. So I'd like to thank Mr. Jim Rogers for appearing on Liberty Nation Swamponomics TV. Thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
It is my honor, my pleasure. Let's do it again sometime.
Is the U.S. economy about to endure a prolonged bout of stagflation, or is a financial crisis in the making? Either way, it was bound to happen after the federal government took away something-for-nothing stimulus checks and the Federal Reserve removed the $9 trillion spiked punch bowl. But does anyone in Washington maintain an ounce of credibility? Everyone residing in the corridors of power have gotten it wrong. Like achieving a soft landing in this economy, it'll be nearly next to impossible to resuscitate a modicum of respectability in the swamp, if it had any in the first place. That's it for me this week. Please read my full Swamponomics column every week on LibertyNation.com, and also please be sure to check out my previous interviews with former Congressman Ron Paul, economist Stephen Moore and Daniel Mitchell, and media personality Carol Roth. Thank you.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.